All right. Great to see everybody. Oh my goodness, I was thinking like, oh, we'll talk about Thanksgiving next week. And then I was like, wait, 1 second, hold on. That's next Thursday. So I don't know. We'll see what happens if that works or not. Um, but the topic I wanted to talk about is a little bit of an interesting one. One of the episodes we have in this week's Torah portion. So in this week's Torah portion, we opened up with one of my favorite ideas actually. We'll so hopefully I'll probably get distracted and won't get to the other idea. So you'll have to hold me accountable for the other one if I get distracted. But this week's Torah portion we call it Toldos, which literally means generations. That these are the offspring, or these are the generations of Avraham, and it um, talks about Yitzchak and Rebecca. They've been married for a while. They haven't had any children. It's been 10 years, and then finally, after 10 years of praying, it ends up that Rivka finally is pregnant. And the Medrash tells us about an interesting episode that would happen. I'm actually sitting right outside one of the synagogues over here. So Rebecca would walk by a synagogue, and all of a sudden her belly would go bonkers. It'd be like someone's trying to get out. And then she walked down the block and walk by some other sort of house of worship, and all of a sudden her belly would start shaking, and someone was trying to get out, and she is very nervous about this. She's like, what is going on over here? I walk by a shul and the baby wants to get out. I walk by a house of worship, which is, kind of kind of doesn't quite line up with Judaism and that whole monotheistic world. And the baby's trying to get out. What's going on over here? And she approached, so that what she does is she tries to figure this out, and she's informed that, you know what, actually, young lady, you have twins. And when you walk by the synagogue, it seems that one of those twins is trying to get out. And when you walk by the other house of worship, the other baby's trying to get out. And this actually does not make her super happy, but it at least relieves some of the nervousness that she had. Why? Before she knew it was twins, she was nervous that this is one child whose soul, it seems, is hyper confused. And it has leanings towards the good stuff and then leanings towards the other types of things that are counter to Judaism. And when she thought this was one child, she was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to bring a child into this world that is starting off with this kind of challenge already. And that made her very nervous. But then she found out, or she was told exactly how she found out, that it's actually two children. And then she said, okay, that we can handle. That's a different level of confusion. That's a different level of approach or challenge that's going to come up. And we can handle that. But if it's in one space, that kind of confusion, that being torn in two different directions like that made her very nervous. And I think it's just always a reminder for me when I read this Torah portion, when I read about this part of the episode, this episode that takes place, it's a reminder for myself. What are some of the questions that I've never resolved about my relationship with God, about my relationship with my Judaism? There's some of those questions that are kind of hiding under there. I kind of, I kind of suppress them. I don't quite think it through all the way. And I think, oh, I know what I'm doing. Or, let me not think about that. So there are some questions that we might have that are not so answerable. And therefore the answer might be that we should put it aside for right now or not allow it to hold us back. But very often the questions we might have, we can start to study and get some of those answers or work on studying that topic in a deeper fashion to get some of the answers. So this is just always a reminder for myself every year when we read this portion, just to think through, are there certain questions that I have or topics that I've always wanted to research that I haven't quite done, appropriate justice to those questions or to those topics. So that's just a reminder for myself. I feel every year this kind of idea. But what's amazing is what happened. Rivka says these words, Lama Za'anochi. Why? Like, what is this to me? Like, what am I even doing if I'm bringing a child into this world that's so confused, right? What am I even doing? Or I tried for 10 years to have a child, and now this is the child I'm going to have. She expressed such a strong language to herself. But what's amazing is not that she asked that question. There's plenty of research we could do on that. If you want more, let me know. I heard a phenomenal class about it this morning. But what's amazing is the next thing that she did is, how did she try to resolve this question? How did she try to resolve this challenge? It says it was that she went and she was lidros es Hashem. She went to go search out, is one of the translations of that word. She went to do research out the ways of God. She went to question God, not in a fashion of like there's something wrong with God, but more of a fashion of I know there's something here that I don't understand well enough, and Hashem, I'd like to understand it. So I'm going to research it more. But where did she go to understand this? She went to the study hall. In fact, at this point, the son of Noah, named Shem, and his grandson named Aver had basically a rabbinical school. They had a house of study for Hashem, where they studied whatever the Torah was exactly at that point, how it existed in the world at that point. Where that's a separate discussion. We could talk about that another time. What exactly that means with Torah. Torah didn't happen yet. Well, yes, it did. It existed in this world of like, what's the essence of the Torah, right? Not in the same exact sense that we know from reading the Torah scroll, because those stories didn't play out yet. So you can't have had that Torah, right, in the words that we have it, but the essence of the Torah, what the Torah is all about, the wisdom, Hashem's wisdom that he shares with the world, right, that already existed. And that certain people were already able to tap into. It was passed down from generation to generation, and God shared it with the world. But now the Jewish people were not responsible 100% for that yet, because we hadn't gone to Mount Sinai. But she knew that the place to get the answer to this challenge that she's having, the struggle she's going through, was to go to the source of Hashem. Go to Hashem. Go to the Torah. Go to the the rabbinical scholars, the sages of the generation, and talk out the challenge with them. What am I supposed to? What's going on over here? And that was the place where she turned to, and that's something that we ourselves, of course, can put into our own lives. Always understand that is going to be right a great place to go. A great answer for us is to look at the Torah, because the Torah is the way that Hashem speaks to us, as we mentioned in the past. That's how Hashem speaks to us. He speaks to us through the Torah. Now there were points where they had prophets, right? We don't have prophets anymore nowadays. Anyone tells you that they're a prophet, tell them that they're a phony, and it's a non-profitable endeavor, and they should stay out of it. But that's something that we is another beautiful, just from this one verse of this episode of Rivka and the children, lessons that we could take from there. But I wanted to just share one more thing, which I think I shared it as an email a few years ago, and I don't remember if I did or I didn't. I should look it up. But I bumped into it again this week, or this idea again. I read it in one of the books again this week. And we have the episode where Yitzchak is preparing to give a blessing to his children. Now, the firstborn, the whole episode of, is Esav the firstborn child? Is Jacob the firstborn child? Right? That whole story. And then Esav sells his firstborn rights to Jacob for a pot of soup, right? Red lentils, right? Okay, if you're familiar with the story, great. If not, we can talk about it more. Go look it up. Basically, he was selling his responsibility, because being the firstborn, being the elder of the family, comes along with a certain level of responsibility. And in this situation, it would have, to see the benefits of being the elder was not an instant gratification experience. And Esav was all about instant gratification. Give me some of that soup now. Well, guess Esav, you're going to have a pot of soup and give up all of the beautiful lineage and heritage and inheritance and all that's going to follow from the children of Abraham and Isaac, and then, right? You're going to give that all up for soup? Like, what are you thinking, man? Okay. But Yitzchak sends Esav to go prepare food for him so he can give him a special blessing. During that time, Rebecca knows that this is happening. Now, you have to remember that Isaac is blind. He lost his eyesight at the binding of Isaac. Okay, so Isaac is blind. Rebecca hears that Yitzchak wants to give a blessing to Esav, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, Yaakov is the one who's supposed to get this blessing. He is now the firstborn, or he has the firstborn rights." And they pull this shtick. What do? She goes ahead and she dresses up Yaakov to be hairy and furry, like Esav was a hairy, furry guy, and Yaakov was not. And Rivka goes ahead and she puts on the animal skins and different things so that Yitzchak will think that it's Yaakov. Sorry, Yitzchak will think that it's Esav, even though it's Yaakov. And this way, Yaakov will get the blessings. Of course, this leads to Yitzchak giving Yaakov the blessing, and then Esav finding out, and then Esav wanting to kill Yaakov because he stole the blessings, right? And this all ties into our world today. Why there's so much anti-Semitism? A lot of it starts from this point, right? And this is really just the beginning point of this, because the grandson of Esav is Haman, is Amalek, right? And so Nazis and so on and so forth. Whoever those that love us so much. Right? So this all stems from this episode in certain ways. But I want to pull out one line from this episode. Yitzchak tells whoever the fellow is that's in front of him to come closer. Just because he's blind, he wants to feel out the situation. And he says this amazing line. He says, Hakol kol Yaakov. The voice is the voice of Yaakov. Because as much as Yaakov was in a disguise, he cannot talk in the same fashion as his brother. Those kinds of words and that fashion of speech, he couldn't do it. This Esav guy was a gruff, mean dude, and Yaakov just could not talk like that. So Yitzchak says, Hakol kol Yaakov. The voice is the voice of Yaakov. However, the Hayedayim and the hands are Yedei Esav. The hands are the hands of Esav because they were furry and felt like Esav. They smelled like Esav. At least they smelled like, some sort of Esav was a hunter. So it smells like Esav. But it's not the smell that he had, actually. They say that when he walked into the room, what confused Yitzchak is that when Yaakov walked into the room actually smelled like the Garden of Eden. And this confused Yitzchak, and that's part of the reason he called him over. He's like, what's going on over here? The voice is the voice of Yaakov, but this feels like Esav. What is going on? Obviously, he was on sensory overload, Yitzchak. Okay, we'll pause the story there. Lots of things happen from that point. But what I think is so amazing about this line is for us to think about ourselves and the way that we carry ourselves around the world. Sometimes we got to do certain things. We got to dress a certain fashion. We need to. But what are people hearing? Right? Even when we're in a situation where we got to do what we got to do, right? And we're dealing with life, do we still sound like a Yaakov? Right? What do we give off? Do we smell like the Garden of Eden? Do we talk like a Yaakov talks? Is that how we carry ourselves at work? Is that how we deal with other people? Even in those Esav moments, we'll call it, right? Our worldly, materialistic moments where you just got to deal with life. You got to go hunting because you got to eat. But what do you sound like when you do that? Do we sound and smell like an Esav? Or do we sound and smell like a Jacob in a Garden of Eden? Is that what we're giving off to the world? The world is so confusing, but we can provide a certain amount of clarity, certain amount of beauty, certain amount of stability to the world. We can give that off to the world. We can portray that to the world. Because that's, people, they smell us out. They know it's a Jew, right? They know it's a Jew. You could be in the middle of who knows where. They know it's a Jew. But how do they know that? How do we make sure that they know that? And make sure that the experience that they have is like, wow, this might be the only time they ever meet a Jew. And what's the experience that they have? Is it going to be what the whole world is telling them about Jews? Or is it going to be the reality of who we are and what we are and how special we are? What are we going to give off? I'll end with this last story. It's amazing. I heard the story last Shabbat, I think. There was I heard two stories. I'll pick which one I'm going to tell you. But so there was a rabbi, a great rabbi, and some of his students were traveling someplace for the weekend up into the Catskills, I think it was, where they were heading during the summer. And they had a problem. They had some car trouble, so they pulled into a mechanic. And the mechanic's looking at the car. While he's looking at the car, it starts to rain. Oh, so the rabbi, the head rabbi, grabs his umbrella, walks outside where the mechanic is looking at this car, and he holds the umbrella over the mechanic while the mechanic is working on the car. But it's not one of those big, huge monster ones, right? It's one of those umbrellas that only cover over the mechanic. So the rabbi, great rabbi, is sitting there getting drenched by the rain. The mechanic is nice and dry. Now remember, the mechanic is already all greasy and dirty because he's a mechanic. But the rabbi is pristine and clean. But so after this episode, the mechanic turns to the rabbi and his students. He says, I've never met a Jew before. But if this is what Jews are like, we got to tell the world more about you guys. So these are things that we can do. Let's make sure we're giving over to the world the voice of Yaakov. Even when we're in moments where we feel like an Esav, let's make sure that we can carry ourselves properly, behave properly, answer properly, talk properly, and all those kinds of wonderful things. The way we do that, obviously, by practicing it outside of those moments. So when we're in those moments, we can act in a certain fashion. But God willing, we should take some of the lessons over here, beautiful lessons over here. Let's work on refining ourselves to become the best version of ourselves. Let's work on clarifying who we are, what we are, why we are. And if we work on those kinds of things, then we're going to give over to the world. We're going to give over to the world how amazing we are, because we are amazing. And we have a lot to share with the world. So everyone should have an awesome, amazing Shabbos. Hopefully we'll figure it out. Either way, maybe we'll do Wednesday next week because of Thanksgiving. Most people are probably traveling, but we'll figure that part out. All right, everyone should have an awesome Shabbos. Thank you so much. Great to see everyone. All right, Jason, feel good?
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Glad to see Larry snuck in on us.
Yeah.
Good.